Hello, I'm Peter Herbert, and welcome to the latest in our series of short CPD webinars. ICAW is an approved supervisory body for anti-money laundering, or AML purposes, like a number of other professional accountancy bodies. In its capacity as a supervisory body, it needs to report annually on the results of the oversight work it carries out. Today's short session will look at the results of ICAW's latest report, published in November of last year. Here's the report called Harnessing Intelligence. It can be downloaded for free from ICAW's website. We're not going to explore all the detail in this session, just certain highlights and themes that we feel are particularly interesting and relevant to firms. It covers the financial year 2020-21, so the year ended 5th of April 2021. Here's an overview of those key themes. So the report provides interesting feedback on compliance, highlights risks in relation to TCSPs, that's Trust and Company Service Providers, lists common failings in firms' procedures, references PCRT, that's professional conduct in relation to tax, and signposts helpful guidance. Let's explore these themes one by one. The first interesting thing that the report does is to provide feedback on the results of ICAW's monitoring visits. The bar charts here taken from the report show that some visits were desk-based and some were remote reviews. ICAW's Quality Assurance Department, QAD, didn't carry out on-site visits during the period because of COVID. Many reviews were desk-based instead. Remote reviews are for higher risk practices. These are more extensive and still involve QAD looking at actual client files. The overall findings were of improved quality, with only 6% of firms not compliant. As ever, the worst performing firms run the risk of principals being expelled and of severe reprimands and fines. The bar charts show the number of firms considered compliant, generally compliant, and not compliant. It breaks this down between firms that were additionally operating as Trust and Company Service Providers, TCSPs, and those that were not. A greater proportion of firms operating as TCSPs were found to be not compliant. On desktop reviews, generally for smaller firms, 7.8% of firms who were also TCSPs were non-compliant, where just 2% of firms solely providing accounting services were non-compliant. In view of the statistics on the previous slide, it's clear that the provision of trust and company services is potentially problematical. It's therefore also interesting to consider the points that ICAW makes about firms that also provide these services. The report details the TCSP activities that firms get involved in and how many firms provide the services concerned. The data is summarized here. Key considerations, also explored in more detail in a TCSP thematic review published by the Institute in 2021, are as follows. Company formation is something that firms do get involved in often, particularly for existing clients. Many use company formation agents. Company formation is more likely to be risky when associated with other high-risk factors, such as a third party outside of the UK. Firms often provide a registered office where clients do not want their home addresses publicly available at Companies House. QAD reviewers consider this to be normal practice. However, because there's a risk of firms having their addresses hijacked by criminals, firms are advised to compare their list of registered companies with the list held by Companies House. If correspondence is received for a company not registered at their address, they should follow this up with Companies House. ICAW considers TCSP activities carried out overseas to be higher risk because overseas TCSPs are not subject to UK money laundering regulations, and there is therefore less visibility of the type and nature of CDD carried out. It's less common for firms to arrange or act as company director, secretary, or nominee shareholders, or to act as a trustee. Because nominee shareholdings can be a way of masking ownership of an entity, ICAW consider this to be high risk, especially where a principal holds multiple directorships and/or nominee shareholdings. It's important for the principal to understand the client structure, the beneficial ownership, and that they're not being asked to act as a means of obscuring control and to facilitate money laundering. The link at the bottom of this slide is to ICAW's thematic review on TCSPs. The third interesting feature of the ICAW report is its summary of common findings. Many of these are covered regularly on AML courses. Here are a few highlights. Firm-wide risk assessments. We've been hearing anecdotally that QAD are coming across less situations where there is no firm-wide risk assessment these days. After all, this has been a requirement since 2017. However, the report talks about significant issues with the quality of the risk assessments. In view of the amount of turmoil over the last 2 years, perhaps your firm's firm-wide risk assessment is due for an update. Ongoing due diligence has been a bugbear of regulators for many years. The report states that we raise this finding if there is no evidence of updated CDD on at least one of our sample client files. It also highlights ongoing due diligence is required based on trigger events, like providing a new service to an existing client or significant changes to key office holders. So it's not always simply a case of doing it once a year. We cover the need for criminal record checks for beneficial owners, managers, and those responsible for AML compliance, lots on courses since this requirement kicked in June 2018. It's therefore surprising that this is as high as number 4 on the list. Reporting discrepancies in PSC registers is also an interesting one, and perhaps an unexpected point to see on the list. This was introduced as a result of the 5th EU Money Laundering Directive in early 2020. There's detailed guidance available on the required protocol on the ICAW website. This states that ICAW would expect action to be taken within 15 days of an uncorrected material discrepancy arising. The requirement to report discrepancies is only required at the point of initial take-on and not required on an ongoing basis. Finally, let's highlight a lack of written procedures. The report states that where a firm has subscribed to a training provider manual, ICAW will expect to see this tailored to the circumstances of the firm concerned. We believe this is a common problem area for smaller practices. Although it doesn't cover it in depth, the ICAW report signposts the principles and standards that underpin professional conduct in relation to tax, or PCRT, which is something that the QAD were looking at in detail throughout 2020. PCRT guidance was updated in 2021 to deal with members' obligations in relation to the reporting of grant claims under the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme and the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. Staff and partners should be well briefed on the need to make an internal suspicious activity report where such a support scheme has been abused for financial gain, and the examples within the updated PCRT guidance are an excellent place to start. Finally, the Institute's report highlights some further guidance, of which there is a wealth on the Institute's website. Here are some of the sources of guidance that we consider particularly helpful. A risk outlook paper published in January 2021 by the Accountancy AML Supervisors Group. An updated compliance review help sheet. Remember that all firms other than sole practitioners need an internal audit function to check compliance. A very useful video on how staff can use open source information, much of which is free when carrying out due diligence. Help sheets and videos on fraud and how firms and their clients can be exposed to it. And an excellent suspicious activities report thematic review, highlighting how many suspicious activity reports, or SARS, firms submit, and what firms report to the National Crime Agency. The report also highlights that ICAW is working with HMRC to produce its next educational film, which will raise awareness among accountancy professionals of the important role that they can play in the detection and prevention of money laundering. This film will be distributed to all firms supervised by ICAW and HMRC, and it will also be made available to all the other AML professional body supervisors. It's one to look for in 2022. That concludes our summary of key findings in ICAW's November 2021 AML feedback report, Harnessing Intelligence. We hope you found the session useful. If you've got any follow-up queries, please email us at inquiries@insight-training.co.uk. And for information about our full 2022 programme of events, please visit www.insight-training.co.uk. Our website contains a range of other resources. You can access previous months' free CPD videos in the blog and news section. You'll also find information on our website about our comprehensive AML e-learning and assessment programme. It's been good to speak to you. Speak to you again soon.